Hi, this is Tasha Bergson-Michelson from Google. I am here with Dan Russell, and we are part of Google's Search Education team. We're delighted that you came to join us today for the first in our six-part webinar series. Today we're going to start out with some basic information about how to understand how Google works. We find that we're addressing today some of the most common misconceptions that we encounter in how Google functions. And so we hope that this will help clarify for you, and if you teach others, we hope this will give you language to talk to them about some of these issues. I'd like to start out actually with one of my all-time favorite examples. It looks at search in web search, and in fact, I'm going to show you a trick in images. And I'm starting out with this one because I want to show you how sometimes problems that we encounter every day can be well served by taking creative approaches in search. So I have this problem. I don't know if you've ever read a book and later you remember what it was about, something about the cover, but you can't remember what it was actually called, so you can't identify the book. Well, here I want to just take a moment to show you how I solve this particular issue. So I need this book, and I know it is about Napoleon, and I know it's a book. And I also know, luckily, that Google will spell check for me. When I run this search, I actually go over to images, and there are a lot of book covers here. So what I know about my book, what I recall, is that it was green, and it had an eagle on the cover. Here, in the left hand, I'm on the left-hand side of the page, down at the bottom in this panel, there are these color boxes. And when I click on green, it actually filters for me. Here now, I see a bunch of images matching Napoleon and book, and when I scroll down, indeed, I start seeing the book that I was looking for. And here is the cover. It's the Campaigns of Napoleon, and now I can go to the school catalog and look it up and actually pull the book and read it. Now, I start with this because as we move through the courses, we're going to be talking a lot about new ways of thinking about search. The web is changing rapidly, and tools, both our proprietary tools and our free online tools, are changing to meet the needs and to embrace the creativity that content creators and aggregators are providing us. But before we can start, and so I like this example because it's a creative problem-solving tool that really wasn't available to us until quite recently. But before I can understand better all the different ways that I can embrace creative searching on the web, I really need to understand a little bit about the basics about how Google works. So I'm going to walk you through that now. And we're going to start with a rundown. I'm giving you some shots from a video, which I am going to share with you later as a link. But as you know, the web, when it started out, we had a number of search engines, and they use this technology called a spider. You can see this little spider up here in the corner. And the way that search engines like Google get their content is this program called a spider goes out to websites that the search engine knows exist. So the spider will visit a web page, and it will essentially take a copy of the content of that page and send it back to the servers, and then it will follow all the links on this page to other pages on the site and to other websites that this particular page links to, and on, and build a huge network of websites that we both know exist and we know the contents of their pages. So then we have back on our servers, on the Google servers, all of these copies of all the pages that our spider has visited. Now, an important thing for you to know then is when you're searching on Google or on any proprietary tool, on any search tool, you're not actually searching the web pages as they now exist. You're searching our copies that we made the last time you visited. Now, at this point, Google is crawling the web extraordinarily quickly and will visit popular websites many, many, many times a day. So it's a pretty fresh set of copies, but it is copies nonetheless. Now, once you take all the copies of all the billions of pages that we have, how does Google determine which pages to return for your search? Well, let's say you did a search, for example, for Birch's theorem, which you see here. You go ahead, you type your words into the search box, and then Google looks for them. So what we've done with all those pages that we copied from around the web is we've created an index, and we index all the words on the pages, on every page. And we put them in an alphabetical list, much as you would find in the back of a book, but instead of page numbers, we have URLs. So if you were to look at California, let's say in our index, the word California, you would essentially be able to see every web page that we've discovered that has the word California on it. So when you type in these two words, Birch's and theorem, we look for all the pages with word Birch's and all the pages with word theorem, compare them, and bring you back a listing of all the pages that contain both those words. So if you're used to using paid databases, fee databases, generally you would type an and in between Birch's and theorem potentially to say that you wanted both words. One of the innovations that Google has brought is the and is there, it's implied or invisible. So even though you don't see it, actually this is a search for Birch's and theorem. It means we're bringing back pages with both words, and you don't need to tell us that you need both words. So here are the results for Birch's theorem. Here are the results for Birch's and theorem. They're essentially the same because the and doesn't have any impact. You don't need it. Now, another element that you are used to, perhaps, if you use fee databases, is that stop words, that is small words like a or is or the, get ignored, and you can't search for them. One thing that's important to know about searching in Google is that we actually do look at every word. We consider every word. And when I say we, of course, I mean our algorithm. But we consider every single word. And there's a very good reason for that. Consider the word who. If you search for the word who, you'll find what we've discovered most people are looking for when they type that in, which is the World Health Organization. Further down the page, you'd see results for definitions of the word who and so forth. But there is a distinct difference between what people want when they search for who and, for example, when they search for the who, which would bring back the band. And of course, there's another distinct difference if someone searches for a who, which of course finds Horton Hears a Who. So we've found that people who come searching for onion want something significantly different than the onion. And for that reason, your stop words, the little words, do matter in a Google search. Here's an illustration of that. You may have seen people who type in their full question. My 1-year-old cow has blisters on its tongue. What's wrong with it? Well, you can see here that we have words like my, we have words like my that don't want to cooperate. There we go. Words like my, which do appear. The word has appeared right here in our results. And so these small words are all kind of cluttering up my search. So that's one reason why you don't want to be typing in full questions. You're welcome to use this example. There are many other good ones with your students to demonstrate that, in fact, you can have issues if you type in your whole question. If you use a lot of small words, it can really clutter up your results. And along those lines, I think that one of the best skills that we can develop, one of the best skills that we can develop as searchers is when we type something in and get a result that we don't expect, to really look critically at the results and ask, why did this happen? Why didn't this respond the way I expected it to respond? And as we're going to be talking about, the best thing you can do is before you run a search, actually think about when I type this in, what do I expect to happen, so you can compare it to what actually does to help with quality control. Another thing that we take into account is the order in which you put your results. For example, in which you put your search terms, pardon me. For example, here we have grass snake. Pretty much when I type in grass snake, Google looks for the words in the order I've entered them, grass and then snake. The reason for doing that, and I thank Berkeley's library for this fantastic example, is because if you're looking for snake grass or snake in the grass, you might have really, really different results. So when you type in your words in the order that you want them to come up, like grass snake, we then take those words and we look at these search results, or we look at all the results that are brought up, and we look where your search terms appear. So several of the questions we ask ourselves in ranking are, do the words appear? Are they in the order that you asked for them? How many times do they appear in the document? And then we look for a kind of aboutness. How good a match is this document to your needs, by asking questions like, are your search terms near the beginning of your result? Are they perhaps in the web address? And are they in the title? And those are the kinds of things that we contemplate while we, when we look at your results. Now, here are some things that matter and some things that don't. As we discovered by looking at the example of who and the who and a who, every word can matter. And also, as with snake grass and grass snake, the order matters. Something that doesn't matter is capitalization. There's only one example, which we're going to talk about today, one instance in which capitalization is seen by Google. That's with the search term or, which we'll cover shortly. But otherwise, we do not actually see any capitalization. I find it good housekeeping to type everything in lowercase. That way, I don't need to worry about it at all. Another thing that doesn't matter is punctuation. For the most part, we can't see anything. So if you're looking for something with a percent sign, Google won't actually see it, so you need to find a workaround. Parentheses don't have any impact, but there are some things we can see. Let me show you an example. So, for example, if I'm doing a search for, well, 34, for example, brings back a very different result from $34. So we do see a dollar sign, but you will notice that 34 does not bring back something other than it calculated for me the decimal interpretation of 34%. But if you look at my results here, you'll see that the percent sign has not been taken into account. So generally speaking, the types of the things that matter and that Google can see are the dollar sign. We can see a sharp sign or hashtag, so that you can look for Twitter hashtags, you can look for C#, and we can do ++ for C+, and we can do plus for Google+, but we otherwise don't see plus signs. So generally speaking, if you have punctuation in your search, you need to come up with some sort of workaround. Now, another thing that we are able to do that's very interesting is for many years we've been compiling an automated Thesaurus for synonyms and related terms. So actually, I was quite pleased to find that this one synonymized very nicely which I hadn't anticipated. But if I do a search for death tax, which is one way to talk about a concept, but which has a very strong implication behind it for the type of information you'd find, right? Generally, if you find pages that are talking about a death tax, they have a particular political bent. But what I discovered is we're actually synonymizing estate tax. So if you do a search for one, you will get both, at least in this direction. So in cases where we've discovered related terms that people search for frequently, they will all come up. Another example is if I search for thumb drive, I'll also get USB drive and other things like that. Also, if I search for kittens, I can get results for cats. So generally speaking, we are starting to, we have an increasing list, an increasing understanding of when people look for one term, other terms they may want. It's something to keep an eye on because you also want to make sure that in the context, as you get into more complex academic searching, that the context that you intend is what's being offered. And actually in our next webinar, we'll talk about operators for dealing with that if the results are other than what you expect. Now, as we were saying, one of the things that Google does when it's deciding about how to rank your results is it looks for words that are search terms that are in your title. It looks for search terms in the same order that you put them in and in close proximity. So here's another reason why in academic search, typing in a question can be problematic. Because, of course, when you think about web pages that have a question in the same order that you type it in and in the title, that occurs in answer sites like Yahoo Answers and Wiki Answers down here, and so forth. So that when you type in a question, if there's an answer site that has had a question asked similarly, then it will tend to come up high in the results. It's one of the reasons that you see students getting so many answer sites in their search results. Now, I did have a public librarian say, yes, and that's why whenever I want an answer site, I type in my search as a question. So that's a very, very positive way to handle that, but it's also good for you to know that typing in full questions is going to lead to more answer sites in your results. I want to take a minute. We are going to go over to live Google shortly, but I want to take another minute to talk about also what you see in your search page. The results we've been looking at, let's say what led to the Russian Revolution, one thing you may notice about it is there are no advertisements in the results. One of the things that Google does is we try very hard to only return advertisements when your search seems like something that may have you shop, where you may want to shop. It's, our business is run on the revenue of ads, so we do have ads. But we want to make sure that you only see them when they're a good match to what we perceive your potential need to be. So, for example, on this What Led to the Russian Revolution page, none of these results, which we call natural results or organic results, none of them can be purchased. There's no way to purchase ranking here. On the other hand, here we've got two sets of ads. And I was really pleased when we started labeling our ads very clearly with the term ads, because I think that helps people understand what they are. These two sets of ads, which are circled in red boxes, you only can get those by paying for them. So the section in blue, you cannot pay to be in there. The sections in red, you can only get there by paying. And there are times, perhaps not in an academic setting, but there are times in the world where either ads are appropriate to someone's needs or they're organic results. But it's really important to talk to students about the difference because a lot of people still aren't aware what is an ad and what's not. And so we want to make sure that everyone knows so they use the appropriate type of source to their need. Okay, let's take a quick look at a search result itself. So I did a search for Turkey Ottoman Empire banned coffee because I heard that, well, the Ottoman Empire banned coffee at one point, and I was curious about it. So here we have a search result, and this is the title. The title usually comes from the web page itself. There are times, for example, if our system notices that a page is called title, and the system can determine the title, what the page is about, it will automatically generate a title. Therefore, I would point out that when students are writing citations, they don't necessarily want to use the title in their Google results as the title of the page. You should rather look at the page itself to determine what the title is. Here is the web address. I just am pointing it out to you because it moved. You may have seen our public announcement that we are working on the interface, the user interface. So what Google looks like has been changing and will continue to change a bit over the next few months. One of the changes is the web address moved from the bottom of the screen, the bottom of the web result to right here. This is the snippet. That's our official term for it. The black text shows you where in the web page we found your words, your search terms. It doesn't necessarily show you all the places the search terms appear, but it does show you some of the places. This is intended to give you a sense of what you're going to find when you click through. In some cases, if we return the home page of a site, because we think the site's a good match, you will instead see the summary that the webmaster wrote of the site. But generally speaking, you're seeing words pulled from the page. An important thing to note then is that sometimes you see these ellipses, these 3 dots, and they vary slightly in their use from academic usage. So when you're doing academic scholarly writing, you will often use the ellipses to show that you've taken out some information, and that information doesn't matter to the comprehension of the quote you're using. You dropped it because it's not important and it's just long. That's not actually what it means in the context of a Google result. In the context of a Google result, it means some of the words you wanted were here, and then in another place of the page, here's some other words you wanted. So this can be problematic if you try to read it as a sentence. And we have, in fact, seen people pull answers to questions they have from reading the search results. For example, it used to be that if you searched for whether you could recycle milk cartons in Palo Alto and did a search like Palo Alto milk carton recycling, the snippet you would get back would say, you can no longer recycle ... milk cartons, orange juice containers, etc. And when you clicked through, you found you were on a fact sheet, and there was a question up near the top that said you can no longer recycle, I think it was styrofoam, and then like 4 questions later it said we are now recycling milk cartons, orange juice containers, etc. So the view of the snippet was expressly the opposite of what you would have found if you clicked through. So please always click through and understand what those 3 dots mean. Another change that we've had to our interface lately, when you mouse over a result, and I'll show this to you live later, when you mouse over a result, you get these 2 arrows popping up at the side. And if you click on them, you see what we call a visual snippet. It gives you a look at what the page looks like. And that can help you if you saw a page before and you're trying to remember to get back to it and you have a sense of what it looked like, or if you just want to see if it looks like the content is likely to meet your needs. You are not intended to necessarily be able to read the results here, but to get a sense of what the page is. I wanted to point out that also the cached link, which is essentially the view of that snapshot we took of the page when we visited it, you can click here to find cache, and when we have good matches and we think we know there are other web pages that are like this one, there will also be a similar link here. So cached and similar used to appear underneath here with the web address. They have moved into this snippet. There's the cached. So I'd like to turn to talk a little bit about predictive search. So if what we know is that when we run a search in Google, it's going to go and look for words essentially that it's found on pages and bring back results that match those. A lot of times that works really, really well. So I often, when you're doing a web search, I often, start with a fairly general basic search to see what happens, because Google has gotten really good at finding things that I ask for. But sometimes I have more complex needs, I'm looking for something more obscure, and it's just not working for me. And then it's really important for me to remember that what I put in is what I get out. So I really need to stop and think. And I know this sounds silly, but I actually have people come up to me after my talks and tell me, you know, it never occurred to me before to stop and think before I type something into Google. And so, honestly, stopping and thinking about what you're doing is very, very important. Because what you want to do, if you're looking for something that's difficult to locate, is to search not for the question that you have, but the answer that you think that someone else will give. As Dan has often been heard to say, it's not about you, it's about the other guy. If you can't figure out how the other guy worded what you want to say, then you may never find that perfect source out there. So predictive search is this idea that I actually stop and I think, what is it that's going to answer my question? And based on my experience as a student, based on my experience as a scholar, based on my familiarity with the various types of texts that are out there, what do I actually think the source that's going to answer my question looks like? So for those of you who are librarians and engage in reference interviews, it's kind of a twist on a reference interview, where you're talking someone through the process to find out what they're really looking for. It's kind of this exercise in thinking. It's not just like wishful thinking, what do I hope will be out there, but realistically, based on all those kinds of literacy that I have in my life, what do I think my answer is going to look like? So if we think back to my example that I started with, where I looked up that book for Napoleon, the way I came up with that trick, which I use all the time, is that I had this problem that I could remember a book cover, and I thought, well, if I can remember a book cover, then really my answer is going to look like a book cover. It's going to be a page with a picture of the cover so I can identify it, and then I'll see the title, but also it might have the title somewhere on the page. And I know that when there are photographs of books on the web, they're not usually like, here's a red book. So what is it that I can do? What tools do I have at my disposal to actually get at that kind of source that I want? And so for the rest of this webinar and the next webinar, which is going to look at advanced operators very closely, we're really going to be thinking about imagining that perfect source in your head, getting a picture in your head, and really pushing it to think about, what do I have at my disposal to actually pull up this source? And one of the advantages is, of course, sometimes that answer is going to be something you can find through Google. Sometimes that answer is going to be something that you know is in, say, the government information collection within your university library. Sometimes it's a person you need to talk to. Sometimes it's a book. It's not always a Google answer, so it's a really good move to make before you just like go into a search engine and start looking around for stuff. So here's an example, a very simple example of predictive search that has to do simply with word choice. So I've been reading about understanding by design, also called backwards design, which is one method for designing lessons and units in the education world. And I noticed that a lot of times when I was reading about understanding by design, they would be talking in depth about examples, but I wouldn't get a lot of lesson plans to look at to see what a kind of real in the wild lesson plan would look like, so to speak. So if I'm going to search for a lesson plan on climate change, let's say, I may come in and I may do a search for climate change and for lesson plan. But when I do this search, I'm not actually seeing what's been done on the framework of understanding by design. And my problem is that I have a sense from looking at lesson plans, and when teachers put lesson plans on the web, they don't say, here's my lesson plan that I designed using this methodology. So understanding by design is essentially a useless search term in this context. So I have to think about what's going to appear on the page that's going to define understanding by design, but which will actually be on a page and essentially, and hopefully consistently on the page, so that it will bring back what I need. And essential questions is a phrase that appears in many or most understanding by design lesson plans. It's one of the cornerstones of the framework, shall we say. So now I'm looking, and I have a lot of lesson plans. This is a climate change lesson plan, and I'm seeing, if I were to click through, that it actually has essential questions in it. Here's another one from PBS that has essential questions in it, and so on and so forth. So what I did, it seems very basic, but it's something that people really, I find, need to be taught. What I did was I actually thought about what I anticipated seeing on the page. And I might have to think a little creatively and a little divergently. Essential questions isn't the concept I'm looking for, but it defines, it is an attribute, I should say, of the concept I'm looking for. Another example of that is that sometimes questions appear to people in their minds, they pop in, like this one. When did the first basketball team play for money? This is actually very much the way we see users coming up with questions. The problem is that when I think about how people are going to search, let's say I run a search, first basketball team play for money, I actually won't find the result. Play for money isn't the word that the author uses. Again, it's not about me, it's about the other guy. As the question I have to ask myself is, okay, the question popped into my head this way, but how's the other guy going to express it? Now, if I think about it, I'll realize that professional is the word that encapsulates the concept of playing for money. And then when I look, I will actually find the answer on a number of sites here, and I can go in and read and find my answer. So those are simple examples, but they are two ways that just kind of stopping and thinking about what I anticipate to be on the page rather than about my question can help solve my problem. Now, we're going to look at a couple of further examples of how we start adding operator components, that is, special characters, into our searches to control for problems. So let's say, again, for a simple example, I was looking for a poem, and I remember there's a line, don't ask Joe what it is to him. So when I do this search, I really don't immediately see the first result, see my answer. It could be I can go and I can scroll through all these pages and pages looking for it, but I'm likely to get frustrated. If I actually just stop and observe what happened on the page, I'll see that in point of fact, my search term just got all broken up all over the page. I can control for that by putting quotation marks in my search. When I put quotation marks around my search terms, you'll see that now it is repeatedly bringing back the same thing, An Empty Threat by Robert Frost, and I can see the same phrase repeated again and again. So as we said, you can't search for characters, so I can't search for pages with quotation marks on them, but I can use quotation marks in my search to tell Google how to interpret the words. Here I'm saying interpret it as a phrase. Another one, when I wanted to know the Latin name of a pig one day and I wasn't really thinking, I did this search. And in fact, now I've demoed this enough that Google's learned and it actually has information in here. But what you're seeing on this page mostly is what I first found. And that is when I first ran the search that night, I wasn't concentrating very well. And Google said, oh, pig Latin. Well, that's a phrase we know people look for all the time. So it prioritized the term pig Latin. The way for me to get around that, again, there are a number of ways. Perhaps scientific name is a better search term in any event. But I can use my quotation marks here to say, no, Pig Latin isn't my phrase, Latin name is my phrase. And again, these perhaps are not, these first ones here are not perhaps the most authoritative academic sources, but I wanted to show you this example because it's a good way to break a phrase that Google knows about or require a phrase that you want. I wanted to address, secondly, a common misconception or something that's difficult if you're used to searching in fee databases. You have probably used not in all capitals. Let me start by showing you. When I search for caterpillar, like I want the animal, I get Caterpillar, the company, for many of my early results. So often in our databases, we use not in capital words, in capital letters, to say that we don't want the word cat. Here, if you look at the results, you'll see that didn't actually work. And in fact, if you look at our results, you'll see that not is bold-faced in the results. When a word is bold-faced in the results, that indicates that it's being used as a search term. So if you type in the word not, even if you type it in fully in capital letters, you will get, Google will interpret this as caterpillar and not and cat. So now, not only are you getting pages that have the word you want and the word you don't want, but also the word not as well, which occurs on a lot of pages but can really mess up your results. So instead, the way that Google does allow you to eliminate words, but you do it with a minus sign, like this. So now, if you look, my results have changed quite a bit. Now I no longer have cat like the company, but I do have some other difficulties here. But I can do my first, I don't want puppets, and I don't want movies. And now it's really about caterpillars. So when I look at this, I see that it's very simple to remove a series of words, presuming you can identify the words that are a problem. You can remove a series of words that are causing you mess in your results and get to much cleaner results. One thing that you should note is that you can't have any space between the minus sign and the word, because you see now I'm back to having puppets, and there are puppets, and there are cats, and there are movies, because by putting a space between my minus sign and my operator, it makes Google just drop the minus sign because it can't see it. Another thing you should note is that oh, I know. I had a student who wanted information on giants, and he started getting frustrated, so he did minus baseball and minus football and minus what else? And he just kept doing minus bicycles, minus food stores. There's a soccer team in Vancouver. It did all these minuses. When in point of fact, he could have done, instead of negative narrowing, he could have done positive narrowing, which means he could have done myth or mythology like this, and that would be a way to positively say, there's this word I have and it has a lot of different meanings associated with it. These are the ones I'm interested in. I'm going to talk about or in a minute, but I wanted to remind you that if you have any questions, you can send them in chat, either to all participants or to all panelists. Dan is here to answer them or to pass any questions on to me. So if you have questions, please do feel free to share them with us. So do feel free to send those in, and I will address them. Anyway, moving on, you'll see here that I used this other operator that I referred to before, or. This is the one time in Google that you want to use capital letters. You'll notice if we use or in lowercase, well, I'm not seeing a change in results, but basically it becomes a search term. And the same thing if you do like this. It will just view it as a search term. So giants, myth, or mythology tells it to look for the word giants and the word myth, or to look for giants and the word mythology. You can see this a little more clearly. Let's say we were thinking about some universities in your system. If I look for Chico Fresno University, let's say, you can see that the results I'm getting have the word university, and they also have the word Chico and Fresno. So you see in all of these, University Fresno, University Chico, all the words are appearing. Because in this search, Google is considering this to be Chico and Fresno and university. The and is invisible, but it's there. I can break the and by putting in an or, and now I have much more what I might have anticipated seeing. Now, it's all well and good to say, oh, that's something I wanted to talk to you about. It's all well and good to say that that I should know about different ways of expressing a concept. But we also know it's true that sometimes we just have familiarity with lay terms and we don't know proper terms of art. Sometimes we don't even know a proper term of art exists. And one of the challenges that we have while doing scholarly research is to make sure that we find the proper terms of expression. Because again, if I type in a simple concept, then I may not get the scholarly work because I may not actually match the terms of art, so Google may not know to go and look for that particular scholarly term that I want. So here's an example. I had a student who's looking for information on immigrants who send money home to their home countries. And when you run a search like this, we find that when people read the results, they read essentially the words they know. So an important search skill to develop is to make sure, to really make sure that you see the words you don't know, rather than glossing over them, which is the natural inclination many of us have. So here, I see something very interesting in these search results. I see this word, remittances. And what's particularly interesting about it is I see the word remittances there, and I see the word remittances there, and I see the word remittances here in this title. I see it again and again and again. And that should be a signal for me that remittances might be an important word for me to use. And in fact, I'm going to go over to Google Scholar and show you the same impact. So we're going to be talking about Google Scholar in quite a bit of detail in a few weeks' time with you. But for right now, Google Scholar is our database that is built out of scholarly works specifically. So Google web search generally looks across the whole web. It's written for commercial use, so sometimes you need to put in some extra effort to find academically valid information. There's a lot of excellent stuff here, from being able to look at popular concepts to being able to find statistics, being able to find visualizations of statistics. There's amazing government sources. There's amazing stuff here. But sometimes you just want to search in a scholarly context. You can do that here by going into More. In this black bar across the top, I click on More, and I look for Scholar. Now I've transferred over to essentially a different database, and this is one, as I said, of scholarly works. And I've done the search, immigrants send money home, and now I see remittances again, here appearing in most of my search results. So I should be trained as a student, I should get in the habit of looking for words that I don't recognize. And now, remittances, I can do a search, and both here, and now I'm going to click back on web in my black bar. Now, in my search, remittances, immigrant, I'm getting much more, I mean, already, just by using the word remittances, the type of sources that are coming back, because I'm using a term of art, are much more academic or useful in a scholarly context. So I've really, by changing the nature, the language of my search, the level of formality, I've changed also the types of sources I'm getting back. Now, let's say I probably shouldn't go off and just be searching for this term remittances if I don't actually know what it means. So I'm going to show you over here, this left-hand panel. This holds some of the best tools for filtering for scholarly purposes and scholarly research. We will be talking over time. I've already used Google Images, which I accessed here. This top part gives me different corpora, that is different types of media I can search, and there are a lot of great ones here. It's here that I find Google Books, I find Google News, which has an archive going back to 1837. A lot of really great stuff. I want to show you at the moment the bottom of the page. Down here, I see some options, but I'm going to click More Search Tools. You see there's this link now, it says Fewer Search Tools. I click to open up my choices, and one thing I can do is I can click on Dictionary. Now here in my dictionary, I have the word, I have the pronunciation. I can even click on this, which I'm not sure how it'll carry over WebEx, so I won't, but you can click on it and you can hear a pronunciation. I can translate it to different languages. This definition here comes from a dictionary with whom we have a contract. So this is someone we've chosen to provide us with definitions. And here at the bottom, I see definitions of the living, breathing use of the word on the web. So I can check, and I can see that it's really, that it is what I think it is, and then I can go back and do my search. I'm going to show you some of the other truly amazing, I love the left-hand panel over here, and as we saw, it changes as I move through from one corpus to another. For example, in images, color filtering is important, whereas color filtering isn't so important in general web search. So what's here in the left-hand panel changes as I move from one corpus to another. But I'm going to show you in basic web search some of my favorite applications of the left-hand panel. So back, for example, back in May, there was a referendum in the UK that there's a referendum about whether they should make an alternative vote, whether they should change the way voting worked. I think it was like we had here in the Bay Area, where if they were going to rank order candidates, or if you could vote in rank order of candidates. And so I want to know about the alternative vote. I'm going to spell it correctly first. I want to know about the alternative vote. And I noticed when I was doing some reading about it that it's sometimes just referred to as AV. So I'm going to look for both terms. So I've looked for AV, and I said I want either that or I want alternative vote. When I use or, it only applies to the words right next to it. So since I want alternative vote to be the phrase that I'm looking for, I put quotation marks around it. I don't want to find alternative and AV or alternative and vote. I want the phrase alternative vote or I want AV. And then what I'm going to do, and we're going to talk about this more next time, but I'm going to use an operator called cite with UK to say that right now I just want cite. I just want information that comes from the UK, and as I look here, I can see that each web address is .uk. So I'm looking for sites that are coming from the UK that have alternative vote or AV on them. Now, my problem is that what I really want is I see here a bunch of web pages that span a lot of time, but what I want to know is what were people talking about right in the month leading up to the election, which was on May 5th of this year. So I'm actually going to use the left-hand panel here. There are these time limiters, and I'm going to use custom range. And I'm going to say that I want sites from April 2011, April 4th to May 4th. That's the month before the vote took place. So what I've said is please only find web pages that Google discovered during that time period. So we don't know when a page was created, but we know when we found it. And so I wanted to, by using this particular filter, it looks for pages that Google crawled during that time. And because we're crawling so fast, it's a pretty good measure. And I can see here, again, I can see that, that Google is telling me the date on which each of these pages was discovered. And I can see now that they all fall in that period before the date. Also, you'll notice this blue stripe across the top, which is telling me that I've applied a filter. And let's say I went into a different search, like California, well, we use DMV, just because it popped up. You notice that the filter is still there. So this is what we call being stuck in a mode. It's pretty common that people do some type of filtering and then don't realize they're still stuck and then can't find what they want. The way I turn this filter off is I go to the blue stripe all the way over to the right, and there's a little X. I click on it, and it's gone. And now I can, for example, find the main site for California DMV. So I can use these time filters on the left-hand side here to help look at information that was created in a certain period of time. I'm going to show you one more that's my other absolute favorite filter on the left-hand side. Let's say I want to know about the United States space program. But let's say the research I'm doing isn't about what we in the U.S. are saying about the United States space program. Let's say I want to get a perspective on what is being said in China about the United States space program. But perhaps I don't speak Chinese, or I don't speak Chinese well enough to actually be searching in Chinese. Google actually has a way to deal with that. So I come down here to my left-hand side again, to the very last link, which is translated foreign pages. Now Google takes my search and it translates it into over 40 languages and runs the searches across the web. What it brings back to me here are the languages that have the most results. It shows me how it's translating my result. Now it happens that German, Italian, Spanish, and French are not what I want, so I'm using these little X's to get rid of them. And now I click on this down arrow right here. I click on Chinese. And now Google has taken my search, it's translated it into Chinese, as is shown here, it's run the search, and then it's brought back my results from across the web translated back into English. So when I click on it, it will translate the page from Chinese into English, and I'll say this is machine translated. Some languages translate slightly better than others. What I can actually do is I can actually, when I mouse over, it's not going to pop up at the moment, usually, so this content is actually all in Chinese. It's just been translated and it's being projected to you in English. And actually, usually when you mouse over it, up pops a translation of the phrase, so you can look at the original Chinese. And then let's say I wanted to compare the Chinese language sources to things being written in Russian about my topic. And so here, these sites are all in Russian. And you can see, in case I search multiple languages at once, it tells me right here under the web address what language it's translated from. So this is an incredibly powerful way for us to look out across the web and find information in languages that we can't necessarily search in easily ourselves and not be limited by that. in just a moment, I'm going to ask for questions, but there's one more issue I actually wanted to discuss with you very briefly. There's a question that came across a school librarian's listserv I was on recently, where she said she did a search for basketball and got a certain number of results. She looked right here to see how many results it said we got. And here it was 561 million. It happens that when she tried using a minus sign, our number went down, but she said her number went up. So she asked why she was getting more results when she did a search for basketball minus sports than she was when she just did a search for basketball. Very briefly, I'd like to address this. First of all, I know that a lot of people like using these page numbers up here, the number of pages found, to determine the quality of their search. But I wanted to be clear with you that over about 10 million, that number starts to be inaccurate. So it's a kind of an estimate rather than an actual number. I tend not to look at that number at all. Well, okay, so the difference between 5 results and 56 million, that is significant. But just looking at the number of results that appear and trying to compare what's happening with one search to another is not really an accurate way to measure what's happening because of the complexity of carrying out search on the back end. In addition, one of the things that happens here is just to search for basketball, we have multiple indices. So when you run most of your fairly simple searches, you're getting results from our primary index, which has the sites that are most frequently accessed, and it's gigantic. It's not like you're limited to 200 sites or something. It's really large, but it isn't everything we index. It's just the ones that we think you're most likely to want results from. Sometimes, if you see this about number going up, what has happened is that we've actually, the search you've run has triggered further down indices. So it doesn't mean that you're necessarily getting access to things with better results. It just means we've looked more places because your search was more complex. And you probably won't get far enough through the results to see the repercussions of that in any event. But I wanted to explain to you that that's why that's happening. So actually, I want to leave time for questions. This has been a basic introduction. Next time, we're going to be taking a really deep dive into number range operators and searching by file type and things like that, and what the mysterious and underexplained plus sign does, which is not what you think. So we hope you'll join us, and we'll be talking a lot more about predictive search and how that helps learn the operators, how that helps you learn operators. However, right now, if you have any questions, please ask them in chat. And so,
actually, I have one comment. It's fine. One thing that if you would do the search, Tasha, yeah, you would do a search for cat.
Okay.
And watch the results. This is a question that came up. So here, there are no images on the top. Now switch the search to kittens. Okay, so the question comes up, why do you get images in one and not images in the other? And it's because kittens are cuter than cats. But the real answer is that what we're doing is we're selecting the best kinds of results as well. And this is called universal blending. So in this case, we're adding one line of image results. We could have done books. We might have done movies or news or something. But in this case, it's images because everybody wants to see kitten pictures.
Thank you, Dan. What are the button topics on the left-hand panel called again? Yes. So there isn't so much an official name. We call this the left-hand side or the left-hand panel. The top, the kind of official technical library term for it, each one is a corpus. So their corpora is the plural. The bottom, sometimes in proprietary databases, they're called facets or filters. Here, I think we just call them tools here. But those are terms that you can use for them. So one last thing as we say goodbye. So I'm at tbm@google.com. You can contact me if you have questions. I know